Alright, well, welcome back. It's going to be part 3 now of this video series. We're going to put everything back together, get this thing primed, get it back in the tractor, and get back to mowing grass and pushing dirt and whatever else it's got to do. I'm going to try changing the camera setup a little, see if I can get you looking more over my shoulder so you can have a better view of this part of the reassembly. Alright, these are our swash plate bearings. Throw a little oil on here, not because these move, but because it'll help hold them in place, like that. Alright, we got an upgraded swash plate. This is an update that they did in here. You'll know you have it sitting all the way down when it is loose. Now in here, the plates are not interchangeable. This is our thrust bearing assembly. And you'll see this thinner race, slightly larger ID. And that's going to go down. Pre-lube our bearing. There we go. And we can't forget our little spring. Alright, so we got some upgraded parts here. I like to use little muffin trays. They just keep things together, if you will. This is our new pump. And our new motor. We get a new filter. We have a new input shaft seal. An axle seal. A new vent. And a fill plug. Here's another axle seal. Okay, here's some seals and O-rings. Not all of which we're going to need. Why they don't give us a new motor drive spring, I do not know, but the old one's fine. They give us new IDS valves, and these two are identical, but the orientation you put them together matters. They're in the new system. There is no check ball in the end or filter in between these two. They just simply go in one piece in the other like that. We're putting in a new set of bearing blocks because they're cheap. And while we're in here, we're also going to upgrade to the new magnet system, and that's going to add 2 more magnets in the case. It's for a total of 3 in the case and 1 in the filler. These little guys go in like that, and we'll get to those later. One of the first things we're going to make sure we do, put a little bit of assembly lube in each of these. and gently work that in. This new pump assembly goes in like this. Once you get everything aligned, your pump block should be able to go up and down again. Then we have our hardened shim or washer and this tiny little pin. To help this pin behave, we're going to use a very small amount of Vaseline. And that'll just help hold it in place. This is where that little pin falls out now. Big squeeze. Okay, now that we got it seated, we'll pull this one off and we're going to put our magnet kit in. It comes with 3 magnets. 2 go in this arm. 1 goes in this magnet pocket right down here. Just something like that. Next thing we're going to do is put in our little brake shoes. If you'll recall, there's a dome on here. And that dome goes against the case. This piece goes in like this. This piece does not have a dome. There we go. Alright, now that we've got our pieces in, let me show you now how this bypass works. When we operate this lever, look how it pulls that. It pulls the motor cylinder block out just a hair, maybe a 32nd of an inch, and that's enough to allow the fluid to bypass so that you can freewheel this. Next thing we're going to sit in place is our intermediate shaft. Now it's important to keep in mind that there are washers on here that actually work or act as thrust plates. You can see how there are oil channels that allow oil to lubricate against this plate. It's important that we keep these oriented the way they came out. You'll notice the shaft has a little flat here. That flat has to go on the inside and it has to face up. If it does not face up, you will not be able to put the bottom case on. Just like that. You can see we have some spalling on this ring gear. Of course, if this was an automotive application, that would be a reject. However, this will still run fine. When it comes time to redo this pump assembly again, another 400 or 500 hours, it will no longer be worth rebuilding this unit, and it'll be more economical to just completely replace it with a whole new unit. The recess that goes in the side here flips in like that. That recess has to face the outside. These guys are keyed so that you cannot put them in the wrong way. Up and down doesn't matter, but you can't have them rotated 90 degrees. Now our spider gears and our side gears are identical. We don't really have to worry about mixing them up. Since we have this as an assembly, we'll just get a little bit of assembly lube on our pins. Remember that recess in there goes off to the right or goes to the outside. Good time to inspect your shaft. Make sure that your sealing surface doesn't have a groove worn in it. And we're going to install our axle seals now before we go any further. We also need our little thrust block. Clean any shmoo off of that. If you go to order one of these, you'll see that they call it a jerky plate. J-E-R-K-Y. Just like the meat. Who on earth named it a jerky plate? I have no idea. This section here that has a divot, this goes up against the control arm. Next, we're going to put in some axle seals. Just double check that we don't have anything in here that may obstruct the seal from seating fully. If the seal does not seat fully, it will leak because it'll now be on the rusty part of the shaft that used to be exposed. It's just a little refresher in case you don't remember. The seal, like this, got two lips. We'll have usually a metal spring of some sort. The spring always goes on the pressure side or on the containment side. So in this case, the spring goes in. Now we're just going to use a little dead blow hammer. Okay, we got this recess in here. That's going to face out. Move this collar over. There we go, that one's seated. That one's seated. There we go. Alright, next we're going to put in our C-clips or retainers and thrust washers in. You will notice that there is a machined flat side and a sort of rounded stamped side. And the machined flat side is what has to go against the side of the spider gear. Alright, C-clips are in. Thrust washer time. There we go. Before we put our filter in, we're going to torque our center case bolts. These guys go to around 45 foot-pounds. Because it's a pressed-in fit, I don't take them all the way there in one shot. Because what's happening is it's still allowing that center case to seat. Alright, before we go any further, we're going to check and make sure that our freewheel function still works properly. We're looking for this to open up, and yes, it does. The retainer for the control arm lever is a split pin in a split pin, or a roll pin inside of another roll pin. There we go. Our new filter assembly. Something I'd like to see done though is that a crossbar get lined up with the magnet. The new magnets, as part of this retrofit kit, actually can contact the screen, and they can wear through the screen if they're allowed to. This one per se won't, but this guy on the side will. So we just push them over, stick a bar, one of the sport bars of the filter there against it, and that'll be fine. Now, I should also just take a minute to mention that there's a few things in here that we didn't address, we didn't touch. There's a little seal in here, there's some O-rings, there's another O-ring on the vertical shaft, various places where you could have a leak. Generally speaking, these are very low usage parts. If you don't wreck it or you are not experiencing a leak, you don't necessarily need to replace it. So do not be too concerned if you have a bunch of O-rings left over at the end of it, and use your discretion as to whether or not it's something that needs to be done. In this case, I know that this is fine. We're only at about 500 hours on this unit, and all of the low wear seals and O-rings will be absolutely fine still. The axle seals, and especially the input shaft seal, which is on the back side or the underside of this assembly, those are definitely three that you want to make sure that you do replace anytime really that you get in here. So next I'm going to just use my cleaner and clean off all the mating gasket surfaces. They don't use a hard gasket here, they use an RTV. That's absolutely fine. Typically my go-to for RTV is Ultra Black. I buy it by the caulking tube, and it's just fantastic stuff. But they also do give an RTV in the kit, and that should be fine to use as well. Well, I decided since I had this, if you got them, smoke them. And I remember now why I hate little tubes of RTV. It's so dinky trying to get this to squeeze out right, but it does the job. And hey, it's included, so why not? Make life easier on yourself. Just apply the RTV to the bottom case. Don't worry about the top. Make sure the top's all nice and clean. Wipe it down with solvent, then leave it. Apply it to the bottom of the case. There's a couple key areas here that we have to watch for. There's actually another seam that comes in along here. On their drawings, they don't mention this at all, but it is important. You want to put a thin layer going right down here. This is where the flat of that intermediate shaft rests against. And this is the bearing of the primary drive shaft. Now this bearing has a seal right in here, right on that side right there. So oil from this side is allowed to come into this bearing, but it's not allowed to go through. So it's important that we run to the edge here and up along the side. That'll squeeze out contact in with the case of the bearing, and then of course down through here. Around all our bolt holes. The rest of it's pretty standard stuff. I give this about 10 minutes or so to just tack up a little bit. And then I grab a few bolts for alignment, flip it over, put it down. Then just take it to finger tight and let it set up for half an hour before proceeding any further. Alright, so here we go. Just drop a few of the perimeter bolts in. Alright, I'm going to just put in the rest of the bolts just finger tight. Just a side note, I very specifically use a brushed impact around the shop for mechanical stuff because it gives a lot finer control. You can literally creep with it, whereas a brushless is much more difficult to do so. So we'll let this set like this, then we're going to come back, we'll torque these all to 17, 18 foot-pounds, flip it over, put our final seal in, and off we'll go. Alright, now that this has had a chance to set up, we're just going to torque our case bolts down. This is not really that critical, just don't over tighten these little bolts in the aluminum cases. I like using a torque wrench personally, especially on a situation where you have a cast aluminum case going into some sort of structural housing. These get torqued to about 200 inch-pounds. That's high teens in foot-pounds, 17, 18, somewhere in there. Start with our center. Alright, now we can get rid of our stand and take care of some of the rest of the stuff through the top here. I'm noticing a little bit of oil down here that I didn't notice before. I'm just going to pop this off, take a quick look at the seal, see if it looks like something that we should be addressing. I am not so worried about a few drops of oil coming out through the top of this. Whatever comes out is going to be just sort of weeping. It's going to be very little, but I am more concerned about any water possibly making its way in. And so it does look like we're having a little bit of a leakage issue. We're just going to take care of that now, because that is a pain in the you-know-what if you want to try to fix that later. There's our two O-rings. There we go. Now it's important when you do this, remember, get your detent in the right spot. Now we need to clean this magnet up now. And like that. Alright, when you put this in, do not put it in upside down the wrong way. It'll hold right now, but you do not want this ending up down into your gear train. So our little basket goes on the bottom. Spring side goes down on this one. Our seal driver. This end here is squared off. It's nicely rounded off. Make sure you don't overdo it. You don't want to crush the metal wall that holds the rubber seals in form or in alignment. Now, I don't believe that this Tuff Torq fluid is actually a full synthetic, and I personally don't put a lot of faith in this fluid, but I do believe that this should be used as a break-in fluid. You'll know you have enough fluid in here when the oil just covers the base of that little cage that holds this magnet on top. Keeping in mind, of course, that the first time you fill this is not going to be the last time, because we will have air still in our system that needs to be purged. Now you can button it up like this, throw it in, and get the pump bodies themselves, the pump and the motor housings, get those primed, or you can do it the bench way. So if you aren't bench bleeding it, which you probably aren't, you're going to need a way to top this up. I recommend using a funnel that has either a hose attachment on the end, something like this, or you can get a transmission funnel, which is this sort of weird gooseneck shaped thing. These work well too. And you're going to want to fill in through the vent hole, so leave your vent plug off or just setting there a little bit. And I have a dipstick that I've made up in the past for checking fluid level through the vent plug. If you can get calipers in there, you can do that, but it's pretty tight. So just figure something out for your levels. But in this case, I just use a piece of TIG rod, and I have markings on here as to where the appropriate level is. Once this goes in and your fan is on here, your fill port is basically no longer of use. So we have a spline adapter. We just put this on a drill, low speed. So you can see now the axle shafts, they're starting to turn. That's good. That means we're getting fluid in through there. You'll notice that we're turning the drill clockwise in rotation, so that'd be tightening. And we also have to make sure that we're actually engaging our control arm here. Otherwise, that pump's just going to spin and not actually displace fluid, and it's not going to prime the system. Once we got the preliminary priming, if you will, done, once we have some fluid in the system, then we can go up to full speed. Okay, that's the bulk of the priming done. Right now, the fluid is just over the bottom of this little magnet basket. There'll be a few air bubbles still that'll work their way out, but for the most part, we're at the level that we need to be at now. So now we're going to put on air fill cap. And then the other thing that we got here, this is just a little modified vent plug. It's just sort of like a test plug. It's going to keep the junk out of it. It's going to allow it to vent while we finish the purge on the tractor. It's also going to make it easy for me to pull this back off, check using my dipstick the final fluid level, and add any if needed. And then once I'm satisfied that everything is looking good, I will put on the permanent vent, which is this guy right here. And it has a top component which helps keep the rain and dirt and junk out of it. Alright, so we got our old pulley out with the old. Put a new fan on while you're at it if you want. Do you really have to? No, you don't have to. But these little sticks and stuff get caught up in here. It kind of sort of tears up the old fan a little. And you also got to think that maybe after 10 years or so, you know, this plastic's starting to get a little bit old and tired. So a new fan's only something like $5 or $10. If you look at the pulley here, there is no up and down labeled on the pulley. What you need to do is you need to identify which side here has more of a boss on it, and it's close. I mean, we're only talking an 8/3/16 of an inch difference. So we have this extra, a little bit extra height on this side of the pulley. That's going to be the side that interfaces with our fan. So we start off dropping our E-clip in down here. Maybe. Next thing that we're going to have here is going to have our fan. And now this fan is actually labeled as counterclockwise. For the K46 at least, ignore that and just note that there is a recess on one side, there's a flat side on the other side. Regardless of what it says here, going to put the flat side facing up, and that is going to go against the larger boss on this pulley. Just going to go facing down like that. So, and like that. Got our wafer washer or spring washer. There we go. And our snap ring goes on top like that. Okay. Okay, and now this thing's buttoned back together. The rest is really quite simple. Toss it back in the tractor, hook everything up the way it was before. While you have it up on a jack stand, go forward for a few minutes, go back for a few minutes. Once you're getting full speed of the tires, drop it down. You can drive it a bit, make sure you have all the power you need there and everything works how it should. Double check that your disengage system here works. Shouldn't be any issues there because we already checked that before we buttoned it up. And away you go. Just a note about gloves, it is a personal preference thing. There's two reasons that I tend to like to wear gloves. Number one, constantly having your hands in brake clean and oil and stuff is really just not a good healthy practice. Once in a while it probably doesn't make any difference, but if you're doing it regularly, gloves are not bad. The other thing is I can swap between working on something that's dirty and then working on internals, and all I got to do is change the gloves. I don't have to wash my hands, so I'm not washing my hands 10 extra times a day. So gloves or no, hey, your choice, personal preference, but it's a couple things for thought. Alright guys, well hopefully this helps you out if you are looking into doing one of these yourself. There's not much to it in terms of technical challenge. They're really quite easy to do. There are a few spots obviously though where we've seen where you can get tripped up if you aren't thinking of them or you flip something around the wrong way. As always, if your life's a little short on adventure, don't look at the lifeline on your palm, look at the dirt line. And a healthy dirt line should go somewhere from elbow to index finger. Anything less than that, you got to change your diet. I suggest some green, maybe some Massey red, a little bit of construction cat yellow, that type of thing. That'll bring your adventure right up. Anyways guys, as always, have a good one. From Finn and I, hey Finn? From Finn and I, take care, and we'll see you next time.